The United States Army just sent one of its newest and more secretive weapons halfway across the world, and China is not too happy about it. In July 2025, during the massive Talisman Sabre exercise in Australia, the US Army deployed the Long-Range Hypersonic Weapon, better known as Dark Eagle, to Australia's Northern Territory. It didn't fire, but that did not matter. The fact that the system arrived at all was enough to spark headlines across Asia and get Chinese officials warning about destabilization in the Pacific, even as they crashed their ships into each other while harassing Philippine vessels. Chinese media outlets and analysts described the deployment as provocative, with warnings that hypersonics in Australia would place critical PLA Navy bases on Hainan and even parts of the mainland within range, undermining China's ability to control the South China Sea. Fudan University scholar Xin Qing told the South China Morning Post that the move was a clear flexing of military muscle aimed squarely at Beijing. But isn't that like every single military exercise ever? Anyway, welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm Kyle, and today we will be talking about what exactly Dark Eagle is and why the Chinese are so worried about a missile that the Army hasn't quite graduated out of the testing phase yet. Before we get started, we want to thank Odoo for sponsoring today's episode. If you're still managing your business with a mess of spreadsheets, sticky notes, and a patchwork of apps, stop the chaos. Odoo brings it all under one roof with a unified business management system that covers everything from sales to shipping to the shop floor. Odoo gives you full control over inventory and manufacturing from a single dashboard. You can track receipts, deliveries, point of sales orders, and work orders in real time. You'll see exactly what's moving, what's delayed, and what needs attention. You can automate vendor reminders, schedule shipments, scan components with a mobile barcode app, and update worksheets or bills of material on the fly. Whether you're running one warehouse or 10, Odoo keeps your operation fast, accurate, and fully connected. The best part though, everything talks to everything. Sales, e-commerce, CRM, inventory, manufacturing. It's one connected system, not a Frankenstein of bolt-on. So if you're done taping your business together with whatever software you can find, head over to odoo.com. Your first app is free. No trial, no credit card, no nonsense. You've got a business to run, let Odoo make it easier. Dark Eagle is the Army's first hypersonic missile system, officially called the Long-Range Hypersonic Weapon. At its core, it's a two-stage solid fuel booster to loft the Common Hypersonic Glide Body, or CHGB, into the upper atmosphere. From there, the glide body detaches and maneuvers towards its target at over Mach 5, which is about 3,800 miles per hour, and it has a claimed range of roughly 1,725 miles. In theory, a missile launch from northern Australia could reach major Chinese military hubs in about 15 minutes. The system is designed to be road mobile, carried on heavy Mach 983 heavy expanded mobility tactical trucks. They're arranged in a 4-truck battery, each carrying 2 Dark Eagle missiles. For my fellow Marines and any ASVAB waivers out there, that means that each battery carries 8 missiles ready to go. Their mobility is intended to make the system more survivable, but critics point out, probably rightfully so, that giant trucks with giant missile launchers aren't exactly easy to hide from satellites and other intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets. Hypersonic glide vehicles like the CHGB don't follow a traditional ballistic arc. Instead, they exploit aerodynamic lift and maneuverability within the upper atmosphere to stymie defenses. After launch, the vehicle re-enters at hypersonic speeds and skips or glides at altitudes where it can rapidly shift direction or altitude, unlike predictable ballistic paths from more typical missiles. Experts explain that as the glide body descends, its aerodynamic surfaces generate lift, giving it the capacity to roll and maneuver mid-flight to evade enemy interceptors. It's kinda like hitting the juke button in Madden or executing a flawless slide tackle in Call of Duty. This unpredictability, combined with speeds of over Mach 5, makes defending against these exceptionally difficult, But China is working on defenses, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. The Army and Navy co-developed the CHGB, that's the glide body, with the Navy planning to field a similar weapon on submarines and destroyers under its conventional prompt strike program. That shared design cuts costs and simplifies development and production, but it's also part of the reason why the program has been plagued by issues and delays. Now that the facts about Dark Eagle are out of the way, let's speculate. Hypersonic glide vehicles, as we've discussed, are notoriously hard to track, and some analysts argue that Dark Eagle could be capable of far more than just conventional strikes. Perhaps they can be fitted with penetrator warheads designed for hardened bunkers, which combined with a Mach 5 delivery speed would be devastating, or they could even serve as a prompt global strike option that blurs the line with nuclear delivery systems. The Pentagon insists it's strictly a conventional weapon, but in the opaque world of hypersonics, what the adversary thinks it might be matters almost as much as what it actually is. The problem with the ambiguity of if it's nuclear or conventional, of course, is that if launched, an adversary won't be able to say for sure if a nuke is coming or not. This could lead to a nuclear response, and that's something that nobody really wants. Despite all the hype, Dark Eagle isn't combat ready. Its testing record has been mixed at best. According to a congressional report, a booster failed during a test in October 2021, leading to a no test since the glide body didn't deploy, and in June of 2022, a conventional prompt strike missile, which is the Navy version that shares several components with Dark Eagle, failed to launch after ignition in Hawaii. Another test was aborted at Cape Canaveral later that year due to pre-flight issues. The Army only achieved its first successful all-up round test in June 2024 at Cape Canaveral, followed by another in December of 2024. That means the Army has exactly 2 confirmed successful flight tests before hauling Dark Eagle across the Pacific for its first overseas appearance. Because it's not really ready for combat, it was deployed to Talisman Sabre 2025 more as a proof of concept for logistics and allied coordination than as a proven operational weapon. Now, to be completely fair, failed tests are not inherently a bad thing. We are trying to do things that just have not been done before, and expecting success immediately is just plain dumb and unrealistic. But with only 2 tests under its belt, even China knows this weapon isn't ready for prime time, but that it will be soon, and that's probably why they're a little upset. No weapon like this is sent anywhere unless there's some sort of message behind it, so why Australia? For Washington, the choice of Australia makes strategic sense. Bases in northern Australia are far enough from China to be relatively safe from most PLA rocket force missiles, but close enough to put Chinese airfields, ports, and command nodes in range. Combined with AUKUS submarine plans, which are kind of falling apart because we can't really build all the subs that we promised that we could, but that's a discussion for another day, and regular rotations of US bombers, hypersonics in Australia underline the country's role as a launch pad for long-range strike. Not everyone in Australia is thrilled to have Dark Eagle and any other hypersonics on its territory, though. Commentators in the land down under have warned that hosting American hypersonics makes Australia a bigger target in any conflict with China. But the government defended the deployment as part of alliance commitments and emphasized that the system was not fired on Australian soil. So we deployed the missile system and China got upset, but here's where things can get a little awkward for Beijing. Even as Chinese officials condemned Dark Eagle in Australia as destabilizing, China has already deployed its own hypersonics. The DF-17 ballistic missile, which carries a hypersonic glide vehicle, was first shown off in 2019 and has been fielded to PLA Rocket Force Brigade since then. China has also paraded the DF-27, which is a longer-range hypersonic system reportedly capable of reaching Guam. So while Beijing decrees US deployments as aggressive, it has already normalized its own use of the same technology. And full disclosure, it does appear to many that the US is behind China on hypersonic technology, and we're just trying to keep up. Now, I'm not saying that the US is innocent here either, but this is just how the stupid game is played. But the cool thing about this game is that nobody wins. This situation does have Cold War parallels, so bear with me here because I'm reading this book called Active Measures by Thomas Rid, and it's an incredible book that, a lot of you would probably find really interesting out there, and so I can't help but talk about this, so just suffer along with me, or skip ahead, but this is pretty cool. Anyway, this kind of messaging isn't new. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union perfected the art of spinning Western missile deployments as reckless escalations while quietly fielding its own equally dangerous systems. And for what it's worth, the US did the same thing because this is information warfare, and if you can do it, so can they. In December of 1979, NATO announced it would deploy 108 Pershing II medium-range ballistic missiles and 460 ground-launched cruise missiles in Europe. This is known as the double-track decision. In response, Moscow unleashed a sweeping and incredibly effective information campaign. Soviet state media and intelligence painted these weapons as first strike systems designed to start nuclear war, conveniently ignoring its own SS-20 intermediate-range missiles already stationed in Eastern Europe since the late 1970s. These systems had the range to reach the entire continent, and obviously NATO was a little upset, so they decided to do the double-track decision. The KGB and the East German Stasi ran so-called active measures, where they planted forged NATO documents that suggested preemptive strike plans, infiltrated peace movements, and funded front groups to stage massive protests in West Germany, Britain, and elsewhere. They even managed to compromise several NATO generals through a peace group that they began called Generals for Peace. The goal wasn't necessarily to make everyone believe the US was about to push the nuclear button, it was to fracture NATO unity and turn European citizens against America. This in turn would make any deployment of any more missiles or advanced weapons politically risky for the democratically elected officials in the West. Like we said, this is just the way the game is played. We deploy a weapon, someone calls it an escalation, they deploy a weapon, we call it an escalation, someone else deploys a weapon, we both call it an escalation, so on and so forth, while we just continue down the arms race that will never end, but everyone says it's the bad thing and they do it anyways. I don't know. I'm just a guy who reads into a camera. From a strategic standpoint, the mere presence of Dark Eagle in Australia complicates China's calculus. It signals that the US can forward deploy hypersonics quickly even before the system is fully mature. It also integrates allies, which in this case it's Australia, into America's long-range strike posture. Other regional allies, like the Philippines, where the Marines recently deployed their Nemesis system capable of hitting ships, further complicate China's ambitions. It is exactly what the PLA doesn't want, just like it's what we wouldn't want, say if they started stacking missiles in Mexico or Canada. Coordinated US allied fires that can reach into China from multiple directions is precisely what is happening across the region. Of course, there are challenges. Dark Eagle launchers are massive and hard to hide. They're expensive, logistically demanding, and the Army still hasn't proven them in combat conditions. Critics in Congress and the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, have pointed to ballooning costs and delays. And on top of that, some question why the Army even needs this capability, because the Air Force has long-range bombers and other strike options, and the Navy has their own long-range strike options like submarines and missiles, which they're trying to put on their ships. But Dark Eagle wasn't the only muscle flexed at Talisman Sabre that might give China heartburn. The Army's mid-range capability system, known as Typhon, launched an SM-6 missile against a maritime target off the Australian coast, marking the first time this weapon had been fired outside the continental US. The SM-6 is traditionally launched from Navy ships, but it has been adapted into a road mobile launcher for Army use giving it the ability to strike ships or land targets at ranges well over 200 miles. Pairing Typhoon's proven capability with the experimental Dark Eagle system highlighted how the US is building a layered, long-range strike arsenal in the Pacific that threatens not just terrestrial targets, but ones on the water as well. China isn't just sitting there watching us develop our own hypersonics, they're coming up with ways to defeat them. Its HQ TAC-19 anti-ballistic missile system, often dubbed Red Flag 19, and thought to be similar in capability to the US THAAD, is specifically engineered, allegedly, to tackle high-speed threats, including hypersonic glide vehicles, by intercepting them in the atmosphere or in terminal flight. The system works with hit-to-kill mechanics, destroying threats by smashing into them rather than explosives, much like the US THAAD and Patriot systems. CH-TAC-AB TAC-2, which is HQ TAC-19's NATO designation, may already be active within PLA service, with tests dating all the way back to 1999, and limited operational status by 2018, showcased most recently at the Zhuhai Air Show. The PRC is also expanding its near-space and high-altitude sensors to detect hypersonic missiles. One notable system is a 5,000-kilometer range, large phased array radar deployed in the Yunnan province, strategically positioned to monitor traffic over the Indian Ocean and South Asian missile trajectories. On the continental front, the PLA is advancing its space-based surveillance capabilities. Through its directed energy and electronic warfare divisions, the PLA has operational mobile laser and high-powered microwave systems, some reportedly capable of dazzling or degrading US infrared space sensors. These systems are supported by at least 2 new strategic support force bases in Henan province, which specialize in counter-space operations. The Army's 5th Battalion, 3rd Field Artillery Regiment at Joint Base Lewis-McChord is the first Dark Eagle unit. They've trained for years without live missiles, and now with the Weapons Overseas debut, the Army says it plans to deliver fully operational rounds by the end of fiscal year 2025, which, in just a little bit, fiscal year ends in September. So whether that timeline sticks is an open question. For China though, the timeline almost doesn't matter. The optics of seeing Dark Eagle trucks roll across Australia during Talisman Sabre already hit the propaganda cycle. Beijing gets to warn its public about American encirclement, while the US gets to reassure its allies it's moving advanced gear into theater. In geopolitics, sometimes the shadow of a weapon matters just as much as the weapon itself. If Dark Eagle works as advertised, it could change the Indo-Pacific balance by giving the US and the Army a way to punch through Chinese defenses from long range. If it doesn't, it risks becoming another expensive PowerPoint program, and we will just find something else to spend billions on. Either way, China's reaction tells us the US doesn't need to fire it to make an impact. I wrote this script with a major assist from Army veteran Josh Skovland, and Savvy edited the video. Today I've got another shirt on from Shop Call for Fire. It's a shark with a friggin' laser beam on its head. It's hilarious. It has nothing to do with the military, but it's just a cool shirt. If you want to see their shirts, go to shopcallforfire.com or check out our own at store.taskandpurpose.com. Use code ACTUALLYWATCH to get 10% off. That's our gift to you for actually watching to the end. And other than that, leave any comments you got any questions for me about the videos, the channel, Task and Purpose, how things go. Just throw them out there. Maybe soon, as things kind of start to slow down, I'll do an AMA or something. I feel like more disclosure, more transparency, more like back and forth between me and you, the audience, is a good thing. So I'll start working towards that. After all, this isn't my channel. This is kind of all of our channels, and I want to make it so that you all get something you enjoy. Anyways, I'm Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed, and I will see you next time.